Have you ever seen a parasitic roundworm that masquerades as a fetus in a woman's womb? What about the skeleton of a human being that evolved to resemble a crab? A planet made from living, breathing meat and bone that feeds on other worlds? Or a mosquito-human hybrid capable of controlling people's minds? While this sounds like the rantings of someone on enough acid to make any man see God, it is actually the work of Eduardo Valdés-Hevia, an incredibly talented artist who blends found footage, the paranormal, and alternate history into otherworldly worlds and stories. In this video, we'll be delving into the worlds and exploring these stories, as well as hearing about the pieces from the artist himself. Without further ado, let's journey into the nightmarish alternate dimension that is the VALDEVIA. July 23rd, 2006, when the MV Cougar Ace transport ship capsized. An unidentified liquid leaked into the water. It formed a perfect Mandelbrot's fractal pattern. In the following months, strange fish were reported in the area. September 2006, Hurricane Julia approaches the US East Coast. Its strange fractal patterns and iridescence can't be explained by meteorologists. Organisms put in contact with it would begin developing odd symptoms in the following days. As the fractal spreads throughout the atmosphere, its effects first start to be seen in nature, from plants to flocks of birds. The patterns would infect anything they touched, changing their growth and behavior. The longer the contact, the stronger the effect. December 2006. The first signs of fractal infection appear in humans. Strains of Rothia dentocariosa, bacteria otherwise normal in the mouth biome, start growing in strange patterns. Their rapid spread would prove hard to control with antibiotics. Fractal syndrome is first defined as a new entity by the WHO in 2007. First, symptoms appear in growth areas, such as the skin, nails, and intestinal lining. It slowly spreads to the iris, teeth, and eventually limbs. Transmission occurs through unknown mechanisms. No treatment exists. When the fractal syndrome eventually takes hold in the brain, strange behaviors start to occur. Though the changes are unconscious at first, they are visible when crowds spontaneously form into self-repeating patterns. Children start showing fractal conducts earlier than adults. The fractal communion is established as a major religion in 2007. As their numbers explode in the millions, congregants voluntarily expose themselves to the Hasdorf DF 2.5, the substance causing fractal syndrome. They see it as an elixir capable of miracles, such as curing blindness. July 23rd, 2011, Hasdorf D 2.5. The fractal is released as a vapor over major world cities in synchronized attacks. As it rains down, it coats every surface. The attacks are planned by a radical religious collective known as the Branch. Tens of millions fall to the fractal. As major population centers across the world are affected by the fractal, authorities react by quarantining entire cities to avoid its spread. The struggle escalates into riots and open conflict against government forces. The fractal is being used as a weapon by the besieged fighters. To be continued. Holy shit! Some sort of substance that morphs anything it comes into contact with into a form that repeats infinitely into itself in a perfect fractal pattern. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Let's take some acid and just pour buckets of this crap into the street. This story plays with the idea of fractal infinity, and also humanity's impact on the environment around them. It explores how human impact on the environment has a much more wide-reaching implication than they could ever know. The effects on the environment have infinite spread potential and go all the way from the largest interconnected system to the smallest singular cell. Like a fractal! He said it! He said it! The catalyst of the story, the shipwreck, reminds me of the BP oil spill. The results are just as disastrous, just a little bit more Lovecraftian here. As the spill of the fractal chemical seeped into the ocean, it permeated each and every fiber of the life forms around it. The plankton began to develop fractal patterns, as did the fish who eat the plankton, and plants, as do the birds who eat the fish. Through the water, through the air, and through the food chain, this fractal chemistry insidiously worked its way into every fiber of nature until it reached the obvious, logical extreme. Walrus Man! As of December 2006, the fractal pathogen now afflicts bacteria which take root in the human mouth, spreading from that bacterium to the human itself in no time flat. And the plaguey for the fastest zoonotic shift goes too! This created a new disease by the name of fractal syndrome. Fractal syndrome starts in areas like the skin, nails, and testicles, and slowly takes over the entire body. There is no known treatment for this disease, but it also seemingly isn't fatal, like herpes. It does, however, have unparalleled psychological effects. The human brain always does the goofiest shit when you really shake it up good. The syndrome causes people to arrange themselves with others in fractal patterned crowds, continuously acting in repetitive patterned behaviors, and drawing fractals constantly. Eventually, enough people have their brains altered by the fractal syndrome that they begin to develop some sort of groupthink. Fractal syndrome eventually transitioned into the fractal communion, using the very same chemical that started the outbreak as their sacrament, like it's their holy water. Of course, this religion did what every religion does, and they minded their own business without jamming their tenets and practices violently down everyone's throat, until they did not that. So basically, Fract Al-Qaeda made a big old cloud of fractal juice and used it as a bioweapon to convert as much of the world as possible to their religion and body structure. And they all lived happily ever after, unless they happened to not want to be a forever repeating shape. The end. Some of you might be wondering exactly what this fractal chemical is. The Hasdorf D2.5 is a reference to Hasdorf dimensions. This chemical exists in between the second and third dimensions. After making contact with something in the third dimension, it sticks to it, and pulls the third dimensional object along with it between dimensions. The things it touches get fractalized at their natural rate of change. Clouds manifest and disappear rapidly, so it quickly gets turned into fractal shapes. A human would get fractalized over years. This means that because children have faster growth rates, they would fractalize faster. This is why the Earth itself looks relatively unaffected, as a mountain would turn into a fractal over millions of years. Real talk though, I love how this work uses so many disparate elements of cycles and combines them to show how easily things can get out of hand. The fractal is a perfect symbol for forever repeating intensifying cycles, as that's exactly what a fractal is. Hence, it can be used to perfectly symbolize, I don't know, the layers of damage humans can do to the environment without even realizing it by taking action on what looks like the surface levels. Or, the functions of an ecosystem and how overlapping systems are actually interconnected on scales of size and intricacies. Or maybe the gradual morphing of a religion intended to bring people together based on sameness, and how that's actually the same as dividing other groups based on difference. Or some random goofy examples like that. I don't know. I'm a firm believer that explaining a concept is like dissecting a frog. You understand it better, but it dies in the process. Even though I'm butchering Eduardo's symbolism with my words, I feel as though the message of this story still shows through. You never know how far one teeny tiny catastrophic oil spill can go. TLDR, even the smallest of actions can have far-reaching consequences, like when a butterfly flaps its wings. And you're gay now. What would you say would your inspiration behind fractals be?
Fractals also, like the first part was also born of one of these prompt challenges. If I recall correctly, the prompt was like Mandelbrot's leak. So I was like, wouldn't it be fun if like there was something came out of the, like something was spilled into the ocean and then the fish started turning into Mandelbrots too. Didn't think that much more about it. Then like I think a year later, I had recently read Uzumaki. Uzumaki is like this town gets taken over by the idea of a spiral, and I love that story. Like it's one of my favorite, like it's my favorite manga and one of my favorite Junji Ito things. I was like, what if we took this fractal contagion idea and this idea of Uzumaki, which is Uzumaki is kind of an apocalyptic story, even though it's like only one town. You know, it has all the structure of an apocalypse story. What if I took those two things and mixed them together, had the fractal take over, but like at a global scale? It just takes over the world, and it can act as a cool metaphor for like a pandemic, which back when I was making that, we were living through like a more active phase of it. It can act as like a commentary on like humans and nature, because fractal kind of in a way represents like nature getting revenge in a way as for what humans have done to it. An interesting thing that I've listened to Mandelbrot himself do a talk on fractals before he passed away, and he mentioned something really interesting, that is, there's something you can calculate called the fractal dimension. An object can be in 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, but they can be in fractal dimensions where they're not quite one or the other. If you draw the Sierpinski triangles, they have 0 area because it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the area becomes 0, but like if you draw the perimeter, it becomes infinite. It's like, is it a one-dimensional object, even though it looks two-dimensional? No. Is it two-dimensional? No, it doesn't have any area. It's just like a weird squiggly line. All this to say that things in nature, as Mandelbrot himself explains, are way more fractal than things that humanity makes. I don't know, I just really like that concept, and the concept of like, oh, the fractal is nature. It'll eventually like destroy humanity, and nature will just adapt to it and keep living, while we won't, because we weren't able to adapt.
Like, let's say this was a real thing. How long until there's the fractal fetish?
Pretty much immediately with some people. If it takes over your brain and makes you obsessed with fractals, I think it would probably be like an obvious stepping stone into between when people start getting infected and when they go completely mad.
I just imagined a fractalized penis. Is that going to be in the next installment, please?
only for the Patreons. Getting an OnlyFans only for that.
A skeleton recovered from the Leyland-Chon experiments on human evolution. In these tests, volunteers were subjected to procedures to accelerate the development of mankind. No subject is recorded to have survived. Their crab-like form is thought to be an instance of carcinization.
Yup, that's me. Evolved into some sort of crab man, died, and then put on display in a children's museum. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, it all started with a team of scientists.
These scientists wanted to create the most advanced human specimen known to mankind. They thought that since evolution led to the rise of human intelligence, that if the process were accelerated, it would eventually create the ultimate specimen representing the pinnacle of human advancement. Stronger, faster, and of course, more intelligent, with a brain more powerful than any living Homo sapien. So unfathomably pure that they would have to be classified as a new species. One look at Krabby, and you can see that they were only right about the new species part. While these scientists were seemingly smart enough to invent a machine that accelerates evolution, they weren't smart enough to understand the mechanisms behind evolution in the first place. Evolution is not a system that has some sort of start and end. It also doesn't really have a goal in mind. It's just doing trial and error. The organisms who gain the advantageous adaptations survive over the organisms that gain the stupid ones. Different adaptations will be more or less useful or detrimental in different environments. Organisms gain these adaptations via mutation and are filtered out with natural selection. And the less successful organisms get to be food for the more successful organisms. So everyone gets to participate. The key here is the environment. Case in point, lungs are great for breathing air, not for breathing water. Since humans change the environment around them rather than just having more kids until they die less immediately, they've seemingly removed themselves from the selective pressures of evolution. Now, I know what you're thinking. How the fuck does that add up to crab?
Hey, get that camera out of my face.
And I got a theory about that too. Evolutionary biologist L.A. Borradale coined the term carcinization in 1916 to describe the convergent evolution process in which a crustacean evolves into a crab-like form from a non-crab-like form. He didn't just coin this incredibly stupid process for no reason. It's actually very common. There are two schools of thought as to why everything always turns into crab. It turns out, hilariously, that the most efficient and adaptable body plan is the crab. And therefore, if given enough time, any being will eventually evolve into it. I don't know. Maybe being crab is fun. Don't knock it till you try it. A machine such as the one needed to accelerate evolution would likely just accelerate mutations. Large-scale mutations in one generation would lead to unstable organisms. These organisms may have organs or limbs that cannot function properly, making them future dog food, to use the scientific term. But there's likely one form hardy and adaptable enough to survive for just a little bit, even with a bunch of mutant tumors in its body, the crab. Being the most adaptable body plan, an organism that somehow survived having its evolution accelerated would come to resemble a hybrid of their former physiology and a crab. While the crab is undeniably the most effective body plan, a bipedal mammalian body would have to go through a complete restructuring to even slightly resemble one. For one, humans have 4 limbs, and most crabs have 10. To have a gait at all similar to crabs, we would need to have 3 limbs used as legs, and 1 used as a pincer. This would result in a hilariously clumsy tripod style of walking. Evolution can't magically make us sprout new limbs, so only one arm would be available to be turned into a pincer. This gives the crabman a strange, asymmetrical appearance. The shell is quite similar to a turtle's, essentially being a modified ribcage that the head and neck receded into. The bones in the man's face have cracked and reshaped to resemble the jaws of a crab. Finally, one of the hands lost all but 2 fingers, and its nails grew longer and sharper to resemble pincers. This structure is made of keratin, like a cow's horn. Hence, the longer the crabman lives, the longer his pincer is. While this might seem cool, it essentially means he's in gross hobo mode and never trims his nails. Pro tip, you can bite off your nails and eat them so you don't have to cut them. While the initial report states there were no survivors, this is humans we're talking about. Of course they're lying. Multiple of these organisms actually did survive, but only the ones that most heavily came to resemble crabs. The scientists were shocked and horrified at the results of their experiments. The crabmen were also notably not more intelligent, but less so. In fact, they seemingly lost most of their humanity, and their behavior became much more crab-like. One of the most notable changes to their behavior was their eating habits. For those who don't know, crabs are often scavengers. The quote-unquote hyper-evolved humans became less discerning when it came to what they ate. Whereas before, they had what could be called a regular human diet consisting solely of McDonald's and beer or some shit. They upgraded to consuming actual trash and their own and other individuals' feces. The crab people also became notably more aggressive, attempting to kill and consume whatever is in front of them, especially other crab people. The strangest behavior displayed by these crab people was not crab-like in nature, but instead revealed a fraction of the humanity they had left. The scientists found this out when they took little precaution with interacting with them. They thought that a being more evolved would be more intelligent and moral. Thing is, evolution doesn't breed, intellectually stimulating friends. It breeds killing machines. The crab people pursued the scientists relentlessly, and then the scientists that didn't immediately Kermit sewer slide upon seeing what they had done were dispatched and consumed by the crabmen. Although, they did it with tears streaming down their heavily mutated faces, and they all lived happily ever after. The end. This story cements once and for all that the pinnacle of evolution is not in fact human, but crab. Remember folks, next time someone gets mad at you for giving them crabs, tell them that they should thank you for making them more evolved. I know you still watch my videos, you can't be mad at me. What was your inspiration for the crabman skeleton?
Just the concept of carcinization. A lot of things were done for like little challenges, like little prompt-based challenges. So sometimes I'll just take, I think the prompt was called Advanced Evolution or something like that. I was like, okay, let me take this prompt. What could I do with it? And I figured, oh, wouldn't it be fun if there was like an experiment that tried to advance the evolution of humans, which is bullshit. Like that evolution doesn't work like that. But like this is like in this magic place where this can happen. Wouldn't it be fun if they found out that humans evolved into crabs? Then I was like, okay, this is fun. I want to do some like more speculative biology on it. So what would a human that evolved into a crab look like, just through the skeleton initially? Then I did another photo of it where it's alive, but what would it look like? So its rib cage, like a turtle, would have to like form the shell, and then the face would need to just get inside the rib cage essentially. Crabs are working with a lot more limbs than us, and it's not really like practical, like evolution wise. We're tetrapods, we can't develop new limbs. That would be like evolutionarily impossible. Only one limb could be the pincers. They would be basically standing on 3 legs and 1 pincer.
There's a lot of what if, and it kind of blends in certain aspects horror and comedy. And this is one example where it's like, it's definitely horrific, but it's also kind of hilarious to think about the crabman. Yeah. How would you say that this piece shows your inclination towards horror comedy?
That's something I've noticed, like as I develop an image, it's really easy to tip it into the absurd or horror, like just with very small changes. So it makes me really aware that horror and like absurd comedy are kind of like 2 faces of the same coin, and it's really easy to go one way or the other, and it's really hard to do both at the same time. Like sometimes, like, you know, that thin line where it's like both a horrifying concept and also really funny is it's hard to get, but it's great. I love when I get that.
So what, you think crabs are like better than people or something?
Yeah, obviously. They have a compact shape, really hard to eat, really efficient. They can walk sideways to escape dangers super fast. They have pincers to defend themselves. You know, like, we don't need intelligence.
I'd argue that most humans don't have it, but yeah.
You can just, like, they have happy lives just being on the shore and eating just whatever detritus they find there. Isn't that a beautiful life?
Dracunculus graviditatis is a specialized parasite of the uterus, infesting various species of mammal, including humans. Microscopic copepods living in untreated water may carry this nematode's larvae, which, when ingested, break through the intestinal lining and migrate to the uterine wall. Once settled, they create a membrane around themselves, fusing to the uterine tissue and releasing anandamide and HCG analogs. This tricks the body into starting a false pregnancy process, which the roundworm uses to feed and grow up to lengths of 2 meters. Removal of the parasite and its pseudoamniotic sac must be precise, as breaking it will release a large amount of antigens, which may cause anaphylactic shock to the host.
Push, honey, push! Congratulations, it's a worm!
I knew you weren't composting, you bitch! Holy pregnant lady worm sack! A totally real, not at all fake, parasitic nematode that infiltrates all mammalian reproductive system through consumption of dirty bug water, then embeds itself in the uterus, becoming a fake baby and signaling the woman's body to feed and nurture it until it is fully grown.
I know you were telling me she ain't it and it'd be opening a can of worms, but I didn't know you meant it literally.
Never got that saying, by the way. If there was a can labeled worms, I would open it immediately out of curiosity. Regardless, let's break down what we know about the womb worm that I would never lie to you about being real. This parasite feeds on all mammals, but the only ones smart enough to detect and be afraid of it are humans.
Infection goes a little something like this.
When a mommy human and a daddy glass of water containing a worm-infested copepod love each other very much, the mommy drinks the daddy glass of water containing a worm-infested copepod. The copepod then dies by vor, and the worm is released into the intestines, subsequently burrowing into the woman's guts to get to the uterus, but not in the fun way. From here, the womb worm creates a membrane around itself, which allows it to fuse to the woman's uterine lining. It then mimics the hormonal and physical triggers of pregnancy, causing the woman's body to begin treating the worm like her baby, feeding it, nurturing it, allowing it to grow into a writhing, twisted, slithering mass. The worm is even well adapted to humanity's external intervention. As if the sac is popped, the worm releases antigens, or a foreign substance that elicits an immune response from the body, in this case leading to anaphylactic shock. Many other non-anomalous nematodes in the same family have evolved the same adaptation, and it's possible that they evolved this in order to dissuade hosts from removing their new skin roommates. Speaking of the family the worm comes from, understanding another member of said family may show us a bit more about our false fetus friend here. The guinea worm is another parasitic worm that feeds off humans in a similar, very disturbing, but in my opinion, slightly less disturbing manner. The beginning stage of the life cycle in the guinea worm is exactly the same as the womb worm. Both are spread via drinking unfiltered stagnant water containing copepods. From there, they both feed on the host, just via different metrics. People don't usually show symptoms of guinea worm until around a year after infection. But at the end of its life, the worm has developed a ghastly way of leaving its host. The infected develop a fever, swelling, and a pain in the area the worm resides in. The worm then bursts out from the skin of the victim, slowly wriggling its way out, causing a searing pain for the host. More than 90% of worms come out of the legs and feet, but worms can appear on other parts of the body too. If the end of the life cycle of the guinea worm is at all similar to that of the womb worm, that's what we call in the medical field fucking terrifying. The strategy of the womb worm is also reminiscent of another evolutionary strategy, parasitoid castration. In this strategy, a parasite ends the reproductive life of its host, aka makes it unable to boink and make another one of itself. This theoretically frees a significant portion of the host's resources, which can now be used to benefit the parasite. These resources include not only just naughty bits, but also the energy spent on mate-seeking behavior and caring for offspring. While this isn't exactly the same as that strategy, one can see very obvious direct parallels to it in the way that the womb worm siphons resources and prevents any actual pregnancy from happening. And also, because they're both fucking horrifying. One question I have is,
Does carrying the worm affect the woman psychologically? I hope that current human ideologies haven't rotted your brains to the point that people will get mad at me for saying that growing another fucking human being inside of you affects your mind. All I'm saying is, she wasn't dipping pickles in ice cream before y'all forgot the condom, so maybe if she won't stop eating mulch out of the garden, it's time to be a caring partner and ask about that? More concerning, I theorize that after beginning the term of carrying the womb worm, the woman may begin to think of the nematode as her child, fixating on it constantly, protecting it from any harm, especially avoiding doctors who may remove it. This all begs the question, what happens when the worm comes to term, so to speak? That brings us to my next speculation. It appears that there are several small masses in the sac with the worm. While these could just be its poops, I have a theory that these are eggs. If the worm reproduces inside of its host, it stands to reason that the worm would want to spread its eggs. At this point, one of a few things could happen. It's possible that the worm would just sap the woman's body of nutrients until she died, and the worms would eat their way out. It's also possible that if it could affect their mind by some mechanic, it would influence her to play out the next phase of the worm's life cycle, leading the woman to a body of water, allowing the next generation of worms to escape and find copepods to infest. Starting the cycle all over again. Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. This makes me want to give myself an impromptu vasectomy with toenail trimmers, but I don't know, bite into a cactus or something. My theory may seem far-fetched, but this style of reproduction is not unfounded in the animal kingdom. One parasite, the horsehair worm, has this exact method of reproduction, infecting a cricket and then making it drown itself because that's the only way it can find someone else to have sex with. Next time you think finding someone is hard, just be thankful that you don't have to live inside someone else for years only to make them off themselves in a blow-up kiddie pool just to get a chance to get laid. If you have an opinion or speculation on my worm theory, or just womb worms in general, make sure to comment below. My opinion is that I'm glad it's only transmitted through drinking dirty water, because upon seeing the images, my mind initially created an implication about how that worm got in there that unsettled me to my core. What was your inspiration behind the womb worm?
Obviously, I'm not someone who can get pregnant, but I just find the idea of pregnancy close to body horror in many ways. Like, the body changes in so many ways and can sometimes like literally get lifelong effects from it. In real life, it's one of the closest equivalents we have to body horror, but it's so normal, right? We don't really think about it. If we remove the human bit from it and we have just something creating a false pregnancy, like a parasite kid creating a false pregnancy, to just keep the body horror aspects while removing all the rest. And I think that just like emphasizes how much body horror like pregnancy can be.
Is this going to be something that would become a series?
I think it's better to keep it as a one-off for this one. The problem is, like, how does this worm get out? That's one of the obvious questions, right? If I were to represent that, it would be either like way too much into gore or NSFW, like stuff that I wouldn't really do.
If you, okay, how do I phrase this? In a world where never went to the doctor during the pregnancy, you go and it's during the delivery, everything's going normal, and then boom, worms. You think it's gonna be a baby? It's worms. Do you keep it?
I think, unfortunately, the worm wouldn't really live for long outside. To this womb worm, the only important thing would be getting the eggs out. That's the next part of its life cycle. Whatever happens to the worm doesn't matter. It would probably not live for long. I don't think even its mouth would be adapted to like eating stuff outside. Its mouth would probably just be like hyper adapted to just attaching to this fake placenta and drinking from it, right? So it probably wouldn't be able to even feed outside. It would probably just prepare a bunch of eggs, and the moment it came out, it's just like egg explosion, and hoping that some of those eggs find their way to water to continue the life cycle. So unfortunately, I don't think we'd be able to keep the worm.
I would just keep it in like a jar, but that's a good point. The Mermaids of River John, 1918. This town in Nova Scotia has seen many stories of animals described as mermaids over the years. This picture caused a lot of debate, and although many dismissed it as a hoax, some believe it to be real. A picture from the same area in 1922 shows another strange shape below the water. Critics claim it was just a small whale. The North Atlantic Mermaids, 2016. The controversial image was taken by a pair of divers as they approached a pod of what they described as mermaids. Some have claimed this as evidence of an undiscovered cetacean species. The Mermaid Fall, 2019. This cetacean carcass was found during a seafloor expedition near Puerto Rico. Some have called it a mermaid, owing to its strikingly humanoid features, but biologists claimed its heavily decomposed state cannot offer a positive identification.
Well, mermaids are real. Who knew except all of humanity for literally the entire amount of time you shitheads could document things? Let's go over what we know. First of all, these mermaids are notably different from many other mermaids of lore. Rather than being half beautiful woman and half fish or some sort of weird eel man, these mermaids are massive in scale, looking more along the lines of a whale-human hybrid than a fish-human hybrid. While a popular explanation for these creatures was that early humans, or some sort of human ancestor, went into the ocean for one reason or another, probably resources, and slowly evolved into dolphin people, as displayed by this dumbass Animal Planet CGI documentary, upon further investigation, this does not appear to be the case. DNA analysis of the parts of the corpse that we did not eat proved that the quote-unquote mermaids are actually a species of yet unidentified cetaceans, the same family that includes dolphins and whales. Though these creatures are related to whales, through convergent evolution, they have evolved more human-like characteristics. To be able to hunt more effectively and use tools, they've traded their front flippers for hands. The ability to skillfully manipulate the environment could prove very useful in the ocean. For one, the amount of foods that require either great force or great thought to extract from their shells/skeletons/houses down here are vast. And said skeleton houses are made from calcium, which is a prime material to be reshaped into tools. Maybe. I don't know. Don't Google it. I at least know it would be a lot harder for a regular whale to jerk off. While the facial structure in the skull and the grabbers on the end of their arms suggest a relation to humanity, these creatures are actually genetically much closer to deer than to people. Not that there's really much of a difference in my eye. Both look the same in headlights. Moving on, looking at their skull structure, it looks strikingly humanoid, with roughly the same dentition as a human as well, suggesting that they've maintained an omnivorous diet. Not only this, but it looks as though their head is structured to allow for a large brain. How smart these things are is a mystery, but if they can use tools and avoid human cameras for decades, chances are they got a lot of wrinkles in their head meatballs. I hear what you're saying. Wait, so sea people just evolved completely separately from land people and somehow have identical front limb and skull structure and are even similar enough to have human-like tits? Yep, you're not nearly as special as you once thought. Weird how that keeps happening. These creatures are around 6 to 7 human wingspans long from head to tail, and chances are they can get much longer. I bet you're wondering how the hell these fat asses stayed hidden for so long despite their size. Chances are, these creatures, with their higher intelligence, noticed the trouble that humanity usually causes. A smart being would likely vacate whatever area is heavily trafficked by the animal kingdom's version of a serial killer, so the sea people would vacate the surface whenever humans were around, diving incredibly deep to avoid the fates that many species of whale and large sea life suffered. I mean, if I were them, I would run from you guys too. I saw what you turned wolves into. Humans and cetaceans are among the most intelligent organisms on the planet, so chances are, these mermaids are pretty smart too. We can gauge from one of the images that they display social behavior, traveling in groups. The term would be pods if we considered them whales, and angry mob if we considered them human. The evolution of grasping hands leads one to believe that these cetaceans were using tools. These traits show advanced intelligence, and if they're intelligent enough to develop tools and live in large social groups, they might be intelligent enough to form some semblance of a society. It's possible that they could have an even more advanced society than humanity. I can already hear you whining. How would they develop advanced technology without the energy given by fire? Ooh. And first of all, you've been complaining a lot this episode, so fucking quit it. And second, ever hear of a hydrothermal vent? Well, if not, they're like little volcanoes, but under the water. They get pretty damn hot and put off a lot of chemical energy too. I bet there's a way to put those pieces together, so just because you're too dumb to figure it out doesn't mean the mermaids are. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface, and 50 to 80% of all life is found under the waves. How well do you really know what you're swimming with? Or worse, what's below you?
What was the inspiration behind the mermaid series?
So that was just another one where I was like, I want to do a take on a classic creature. I really love doing this like speculative biology thing where you allow yourself to take like a little like stuff that can't happen, a little bit of magic, but then like try to be realistic with what those assumptions. Like, oh, humans obviously wouldn't evolve into crabs, but if they did, what would happen, right? So if mermaids were real, what would they look like realistically? And my idea was they wouldn't be like half fish, half people. Taxonomically, that makes no sense from the like tree of life point of view, right? Like fish and human is so far away. So I figured it would definitely be a cetacean. It would definitely be a type of whale that just, instead of evolving fins, because, you know, of the fins, the front fins of a whale is the same bones as our hands, just like in a different order. So what if you took those bones and elongated them back into like a long limb and had like a hand at the end? And what if you like had a much smaller head? You can have hair because, you know, whales are descended from a type of deer. They still have the genes in there to make hair. So you can have like a long flowing mane type thing. And just through these adaptations that are a lot more plausible, you get to something that's closer and closer to a human. But that still keeps like a lot of whale characteristics. I'm sorry about this, and but I will not stop doing it. I love to kill folklore creatures. I wanted to do like, what if a mermaid just washed up on shore? So I combined those two ideas. I was like, obviously there's a lot of whales that wash up on shore. I looked for images of that and then just like edited the whale into a mermaid-like thing.
Do you have anything to say to the people at Animal Planet who made that documentary?
I like that documentary. I think just the idea of it airing on a channel about animals and stuff is not the right way to do it, because most people will just tune in after the disclaimer that says this is fiction and just kind of go with it, you know, and kind of believe it. Stylistically, they did really well. Like, they do the same kind of stuff I do. They kind of fail on the disclosure part of it, where they have to be a little more clear that this is fiction. So just in case someone believes it. I did like that.
November 15th, 2021. A new dwarf planet has been discovered in our solar neighborhood. It was given the provisional name xipe totec. It has gone unnoticed due to its small size and complex orbit, but it recently passed close enough for the first image to be captured. August 7th, 2022. Xipe totec has completed an unexpectedly close orbit of the Earth, grazing its Roche radius. Tidal waves are expected in the coming days. Authorities are warning not to approach the falling debris that was torn from the planet by Earth's gravity. May 30th, 2023. Concerns are mounting worldwide as flesh organisms grow unchecked. Seeds that fell on Earth during a close encounter with the living planetoid xipe totec appear to be fusing and consuming everything around them. Large swaths of the ocean floor being covered in flesh may lead to an ecological disaster, warns biologists. Breaking. We have lost connection with the James Webb Telescope. Its final message contains the last 4 images it captured before losing signal. New data received from the spacecraft Voyager 2. Its trajectory was disturbed by a moon-sized object outside the solar system. The probe took this photograph of it. It appears to be the organic husk of a member of xipe totec species that did not survive its interstellar trip.
Holy shit! An entirely new species of animal-like organisms that's the size of an entire planet, approaching humanity's home at a great speed, and subsequently pollinating the surface of the Earth with ever-growing and fusing flesh seeds. I guess space is just another ecosystem now, and also it ate the James Webb Telescope. This obviously raises a lot of questions. For example, is making little seemingly sentient babies and throwing them point-blank at Earth considered child abuse or sexual assault? What about both?
That's not what I meant.
One very pressing question I have is, what the hell is this sentient meatball, and what's it doing? Some of the smart viewers might have figured it out already, but I believe we can get a better understanding of this big old boy by looking at the media that may have inspired it. This story has many parallels to another masterpiece by the name of Hellstar Ramina, written by one Junji Ito. For those uncultured, slack-jawed dumb fucks that are unfamiliar with Hellstar Ramina, it goes a little something like this. One day, every human on Earth is doing normal human things, like eating processed cheese and penetrating each other and expelling said processed cheese, when all of the sudden, they see another celestial body approaching their home planet of Earth. Eventually, they realize that this planet has a giant mouth, and when it gets to them, it slowly begins devouring Earth until it's all gone, cleaning its plate like a very good boy, and then they all lived happily ever after, unless they happen to not be a monster planet. The end. While the original concept of Hellstar Ramina was to make the reader question everything they knew about the universe, like how planets usually aren't animals that run around consuming each other like the galaxy was the goddamn Serengeti, xipe totec seems to be more interested in explaining the nature of how creature planets would work, and I believe I understand the life cycle of this fascinating new little critter you got here. Well, I don't know if I believe it, but I sure as hell can make it up from source material and evidence. This planet starts as tiny pimple-like spores that branch off from the larger planet. It waits on the surface of its mama, loosely attached to each other by a thin, fragile membrane. When the mother xipe totec specimen gets close enough to a target planet to be affected by its gravity, the resulting force eventually pulls hard enough to separate the spores from their membranes. Some of these spores end up making their way to the target planet in question, and the spores begin to colonize it.
They grow up so fast.
As all creatures do, the spores begin to convert environmental biomass into their own bodies. However, unlike Earth life, these meat blobs all work together in attempts to convert the entire planet into iterations of themselves. You could learn a thing or two from these giant cancer cells, I tell ya. Eventually, these blobs replace the entirety of biological life on the surface, and combine to form one massive singular organism, with each meaty blob acting like an individual cell. These meat blobs act more specifically like stem cells, and begin to diversify into organs, veins, muscles, balls, whatever pieces a complete animal may need. Neat, right? Well, it's a glimpse into your future, so not really neat for you. Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. I'm struggling to think of anything more horrible. I don't know, hug the nearest raccoon. This stage of its life is completed when there's no more local biomass left on the planet. It then slowly starves while looking for a new victim, nursery planet for the next generation of space meatballs. It ends its life as many organisms do. The noble skeleton. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. To a fish, the ocean is the world. To an ant, the forest is the world. To a bacterium, the skin around your rectum is the world. This work really makes you question your place in the universe, doesn't it? I mean, it makes you question. I know where I stand, cell phone ape.
What would you say your inspiration behind xipe totec was?
There's a bit of Hellstar Remina, especially later on, because at the time I first did the first part, I hadn't read Hellstar Remina, so I wasn't aware that Junji Ito had tackled the concept before. But, you know, like retroactively, yeah, there is inspiration there. I've always liked enormous things, just like, you know, megalophobia, things that are just impossibly large. And yeah, just like, oh, what if there was a creature that was like an entire planet? At first, it was just this one-off piece. I really liked it. People really loved it. I think it was like one day on stream, we were saying like, what would happen if we like tried to continue the story and maybe the planet came to visit us because it wanted to like create a new meat planet. It's like spreading itself. It's like its way of reproducing or multiplying. So I kind of went with that and it's like, oh, now it's an apocalypse story. Hell yeah, let's go with it. Like there's walls of flesh invading the earth. Why not? It's not gonna be a super long one. From what we've seen so far, we've seen it put its seeds on the earth. They start growing. They take over the oceans and then they come onto land and people start like try to use fire to stop it. They can't. Humanity, like a futile attempt at stopping what a literal like cosmic destruction event. So we're gonna see that develop until its inevitable end of now the Earth is the new meat planets. I'm sorry if that's spoilers, but that's I think that was a pretty obvious conclusion.
All right, that segues good into the capstone for this one, which is if this happened, what would you do?
I would just let myself be swallowed into the flesh. It's better than dying of hunger because you're in a bunker underground and you can't even get out because you're surrounded by walls of flesh all over and you probably can't eat it because our stomach acid is probably not enough to kill it, or whatever fire we can do, it's not enough to burn it all the way through. So it's gonna like reactivate in your stomach and eat you from the inside. There's probably like millions of years into the future, whatever life survived And on xipe.tech probably became, like, we'd probably end up becoming a sort of like parasitic ecosystem where you have like some kind of parasite that just like latches onto them, acting like plants, and then like other animals just running around eating these, like creating a whole ecosystem. I think that might be a fun thing to do, like maybe in the future.
(1849). Last page of Renard de Savinge's notes. Years ago, I found the shifting skull while exploring the Paris catacombs. I have studied its mysteries since. How does it keep transforming? Is it alive? The answers must lie in the marrow. For this experiment, I will break it. 1865. A photographer reveals his latest invention to the French emperor's court. The portrait tournant. One of the portraits shows Baron Renard of Savinge. It was deemed defective. Unbeknownst to them, the one in the photograph was not Renard. The facade disappeared in 1895. 1896. During the X-ray craze, people buy machines to show the strange radiation to party guests. In one such event, in Hamburg, financier Franz Mansfield has his plate taken, revealing him to be the facade. He kept the print a secret until he vanished during a trip to the Americas. The location of the facade from 1917 to 1960 is unknown, but a string of unsolved disappearances throughout the United States point to it changing forms in a quick succession. 1960, a 6-year-old kid in Chicago is admitted to the Lurie Children's Hospital after a panic attack. She claims there is a monster pretending to be her mother. Her records show another panic attack at age 23, thought to be at the time when the facade chose a new victim. 1977, a report to the Chicago PD. I swear he ate her. They were fighting, she lunged at him, it was a blur, and then she was gone. There he was, swollen, down on the floor, his face shifting. The report was not investigated. The facade's current location is unknown. Yeah, damn! Some sort of shape-shifting being that disguises itself as members of humanity by jumping inside of them and then morphing into them only to skip town and disguise as someone else the moment it's discovered. This is a lot of information, so to help your smooth human brain to understand, let's go through the situation the evidence presents step by step. Our story starts in 1849, when a researcher finds a skull while exploring the Paris catacombs. The skull is warped and distorted. Not only that, but it appears that the shape of the skull continues to grow and change, almost like it's still alive. The researcher claims that he will attempt to break the marrow to see how the skull functions. But we never learn if he had any findings, because he's bad at following through on his promises because he's the facade now. Following this, the facade, disguising as Renard because it jumped inside his body, is documented in France when a photographer uses what looks like a combination of a Lazy Susan and an old-fashioned camera to reveal that half of this guy's face is a hideous chicken monster. I was uncalled for. 30 years later, the facade disappeared, and then 1 year after that, the creature reappears in Hamburg, Germany. The facade, now disguised as one Franz Mansfield, has his X-ray plate taken at a party. Weird. Humans nowadays normally just drink fun poison at parties. This X-ray plate reveals his weird shifty skull, which seemingly makes him self-conscious because he kept the plate a secret, and then a little while later, skipped town again. No one knew exactly where the facade went, but in this time, a string of disappearances in the US pointed to traveling incognito through America. The land of opportunity. Wait, sorry, so that's a typo. The land of obesity. In 1960, the facade reappeared, this time in Chicago. Well, if that kid isn't full of shit, which kids typically are, but this has too much supporting evidence, so I guess not. Side note, I like how in this universe, Chicago's 100% murder rate can just be explained by the facade. After this, the monster mommy must have noticed that the kid was horrified of her, and she jumped ship again. Now, what did we learn from all this? That's right. If you're going to be a disguising predatory monster,
Pick your targets carefully and avoid detection. Now that I've explained this to you with the subtlety and nuance of a crazed man pressing his dick against a high floor balcony glass, let's get into the questions this story raises. First of all, what the hell are the facade? The facade is a being that changes bodies not by eating them, but by getting eaten. The scene described in the Chicago PD call is the facade posing as that child's mother before jumping into its next victim. Through biological mimicry, or some sort of cognitohazardous interference, it seems to fool everyone the victim knows, with the exception being children, or at least that stupid one. After this, it appears that the facade seems to go about the daily life of the victim. It's the simple things in life that give the facade joy. This leaves one question unanswered. What is this creature's motivation? While one would be quick to point out that it does in fact, in a way, predate on people, it only does that to get rid of them and subsequently take their form. It hasn't shown any evidence of attacking anyone else once it's already assimilated, so it doesn't appear to be taking the people for the nutrients, nor the fun of it, but solely to replace them. It doesn't seem to be hurting anyone else. So, what the hell could it possibly want? I think that this part of the story is where the Lovecraftian magic really starts to settle in. Sure, it would be hella spooky if we were told exactly what the plans were for this little creature's dastardly deeds. But I think it's even scarier if it's left unknown, and our minds are left to run wild with its possibilities. Is it ingratiating itself into family units to more effectively understand human psychology and biology? It could even be studying our habits in order to create some sort of super product to sell back to us with a multi-level marketing scheme to keep us all enslaved as both producer and consumer.
No, wait. It can't be. It can't be. It's back. Just in a different form. Why must you take everything from us? Away with you, Spectre! Away with you!
The current location of the Herbalife CEO is unknown. But you know what that means. It means that someone is probably gonna be swallowed and replaced soon.
What is the inspiration behind the facade?
So it was just a conversation I had with Luke. We wanted to collaborate on something, and we were trying to think like, what would be a fun topic to tackle? And something I'd like to do, especially with collaborations, is like, let's take a classic monster and just do our own take on it. It doesn't have to be like a super fancy twist, just like a different take. Like the Lycanthrope series was, we're gonna take werewolves and vampires and invert their roles. Like, the werewolf is now like the aristocrats metaphor, right? I was thinking like something similar, but I wanted to do doppelgangers. I really liked Luke's style and how he does these kind of like body horror things. I was like, that would be really fun if you have like their face can literally stretch, and I think that's how the drawings of the skulls came like through that. So like, like the skull literally stretches, and that's how we came upon the design. And then we said like, okay, let's just put it all out of order and let people reconstruct and figure out that, we're talking about the same individual. We're just following this thing throughout like a century, essentially.
What was it like working with Luke Baker?
It was great. I don't know. I just really love collaboration in general, because you can just like think of, okay, what are your strengths? What are my strengths? What can we do like combining them? I really love the ideas that Luke came up with, like, what if we had like a kid's drawing, or what if we had a police sketch of one of them? And we kind of really get each other in the sense of we never want to show the creature directly, because whatever your imagination can come up with is probably worse than whatever we can draw. We would like to cover like the future, like what happened after the 1970s in the last we see of the facade. So we have like a few decades to have him go through different identities and stuff, and we never want to show it directly. That's one of the troubles with it, is like, we could just have like a cell phone picture of it, because everybody has a good camera nowadays, but we don't want that. That wouldn't be fun.
Is there, you'd say, like a message to this piece?
Like, what if there was a parasite, but that took advantage of like society? It takes the place of one person and just like coasts or through life, being that person until people start getting suspicious of them, move on to the next one. That's kind of where we wanted to go, like just as a fun concept. But I don't think there's like any deeper thematic elements there.
Awesome. Cool. Are you the facade?
I can't comment on that.
The following pictures and documents were retrieved from the remains of the ship Storaker. Its crew and most of its cargo lost in a storm off the coast of Denmark while returning from an archaeology expedition to the Viking burial ground of Sondrum. Excerpt from the diary of Maine archaeologist Tor J. Arn, 22nd of March, 1905. Today, we dug up something strange. It wasn't far from the other graves in the area, but it was buried deeper. The extraction was difficult, since it had become encased in a hard piece of sandstone we had to break through. This artifact, it doesn't look like anything we've seen from the Vikings. It seems too detailed for one of their carvings, and the dark stone it's made out of is certainly not from the region. A piece of loot from one of their raids, perhaps? We'll have to bring it back to Copenhagen and analyze it further. The crew is quite disturbed by the artifact, and I've heard far-fetched speculation about its origins. As much as I hate to admit, it makes me feel uneasy too. There's one more thing I'm hesitating to write down. When I touched its surface, I felt a slight vibration, nearly imperceptible. None of the others seemed to notice. Thinking back on it, that was likely the result of a tired mind and an imagination stirred by old wives' tales. Tomorrow we'll load it up on the ship with the rest of the findings and come back to the museum. May, 1909, Brisbane, Australia. Fisherman Adam James Clark makes an unusual catch. He would keep the object in his home, fascinated by it, until his disappearance 6 months later. Adam was a dutiful diarist. In his notes, we can see the slow progression of his mental state and his deepening obsession with the cocoon. May 14th, 1909. The strangest thing got tangled in my net today. I have no idea what it is, but I managed to pull it to shore. I think it may be a live egg or a cocoon of some sea animal. If I put my hand to it, I can feel it twitch a little. Seems to survive well enough out of the water, for now. Wonder if something will come out of it. A photographer was at the jetty, and I got back and got me some pictures of the thing. We'll be here to keep some record if it ends up rotting away. The husks takes up a great deal of space in my room, but that beats empty. It's a good listener, though not too fond of conversation it seems. I've been waiting so long for him to come out. Sometimes I put my ear to the shell and listen to him move in there, metamorphosing. I read that during the cocoon phase, insects melt into some sort of liquid inside, and then rebuild themselves into something new. Whatever he looks like, I can't wait to welcome him into this world. I wonder if he'll see me as a father. Sometimes I'm afraid to leave the room and fear that the husk that traps him may open while I'm not here. I hope the grandkids haven't missed me. This last diary entry is dated November 3rd of that year. Adam was never seen again. November 3rd. He nearly doesn't move anymore. Is he dead? He needs something to finish his metamorphosis. I think he needs me. He needs me! I must enter. I must unite with him. Give his body structure. He is Adam Clark. I am him. Bound by a husk, prison of flesh and chitin. I will bring him to where I found him, pry his shell open, climb inside, and jump into the water as we become one. We will finally complete his beautiful transformation. We will be free. Weeks later, a fishing boat would discover what appears to be the remains of the shell, broken and completely empty. 1910, Northport, Maine. An unidentified carcass washes up on shore. Local newspapers report, strange shell washes ashore. Residents from Northport reported a strange animal washing up ashore this morning. "'Tis a honkin' lobster. We thought it was a whale at first," said Eugene Morel, local fisherman. "We were going to boil it, but tain't no meat inside." The carcass was left on the docks, so a biologist from Maine University could identify it. Tragedy in Northport. Friday morning, the body of Jimmy Hall, 12-year-old boy from Northport, was found lying on the docks. The child appears to have slipped and fallen on his head while sneaking out at night to see an unidentified carcass that had washed up on shore. The town's fishermen who had discovered the animal claimed it carried a curse and took it upon themselves to destroy the remains of the lobster-like shell by burning it, much to the chagrin of 2 Maine University biologists who had come to inspect it. Unearthed pictures from the Australasian Antarctic expedition. Year, 1913. Something strange is found in the ice. Cecil Madigan's diary on the subject. 17th January, 1913. The sleighing party was a total success. We mapped a large area east of the base, but the most fascinating finding was what appears to be an enormous larva, as big as a man. I am no biologist, McLean keeps saying it'll be the discovery of the century. The insect was perfectly preserved in the ice, so we sawed around it and brought back the whole block. The whole team had a toast of the discovery. Due to Mawson's team's unfortunate journey, a small group was left in Antarctica for a whole year more than expected. 9th of February, 1913. It is starting to dawn on me that we were staying for more than 1 year. Mawson came back and told us of his tragic journey. We will miss Ninnis and Metz, but no use wallowing. The ship has sailed. This year, I will assist McLean in studying the insect. The crew has taken to calling her Margot, after Maggot. We will not break the ice as the body might be fragile. Jeffries, the new arrival, has taken a lot of interest in the bug, and keeps coming to see it, asking all sorts of questions. He could become an annoyance. Excerpts from Sidney, Jeffries, and Madigan's diaries from the incident that led to the loss of the specimen in the winter of 1913. Jeffries would never recover his sanity after the expedition. 2nd of August, 1913. He broke it. That madman, Jeffries, completely lost his block. Went to the storage room in the middle of the night and took an axe to Margot. He minced her so thin we couldn't recover a single piece of her. Still this work, and we will not be able to bring a thing back to Australia. We found Jeffries outside, repeating that he had freed her over and over. We locked him in, since he's become a danger to the mission. Last surviving photographs from the secretive De La Cruz family, Mexico, 1910 to 1920s. The following documents were smuggled out by Adrian de la Cruz, a disowned relative. According to him, the thing in the photo is who the family called Tío Alfredo. The de la Cruz were local landowners. They lived in an isolated estate in Morelos for generations, surrounded by croplands and pastures. They were rarely seen outside, leading locals to circulate many rumors about the family and their sickly disposition. Adrian de la Cruz was the only household member known to have escaped. After fighting in the revolution, he chose not to come back and left to Mexico City, where he studied chemistry and met his wife, Cristina. The pictures were retrieved by him, sent with the following letter. Cristina, I am sorry for leaving without a word. I came back to my family home. Something was left undone. You will not believe this, so I put some photos in this envelope. This thing, Tío Alfredo, it has always been there, in the attic. I gave it my blood. We all did. I don't know how long it has been with us, since the time of my great-grandfathers, or more. And for this long, everyone has been convinced that it is a part of the family. Maybe it used to be, but none of that matters. I need to break this cycle and save them from this torture. I have brought a vial of cyanide. I will drink it, then go into the attic and let the beast feed on me, just like it used to. That horrible, empty sensation. If all goes well, I will then drink my antidote and come back to you, having rid the world of this devil. Adrian. We have not been able to find any more documentation on the incident, except for a photo, dated to around the same time as the letter, taken in a cemetery near the De La Cruz estate. Italy, 1917. An art collector finds 3 unusual statues in a small museum in Aquila. They appear to represent angels with insect wings, pincers, and extra sets of limbs. Entranced by them, he would acquire the sculptures for his personal collection. To find out more about them, he contacted Francis Aidan Gasquet, archivist in the Vatican. They found a codex from 15th century Spain. It was commissioned by Antonio Perez de Ayala, a nobleman's son turned monk. It describes his spiritual experience after finding an angel. The angel was said to come from a cocoon found in the sea. It was likely worshipped in Ayala's monastery, as proved by the surviving works of art. We do not know what happened, only a letter that was found in which the Vatican asks for a local noble to help destroy a heresy. The art collector never released the statues from his personal collection, so the old pictures are all the proof we have of their existence. You open the old binder. Inside, some pictures, torn pages, and a letter. Let me tell you of the time I saw one of the megalomorpha. You heard this story before, but these documents should help clear your skepticism. It was 1923, and I was traveling through British Tanganyika. After finishing my studies in anthropology at the age of 24, I was eager to go out and document unknown cultures. During that trip is when I met the Jamu people, a wonderful and rich society with barely any interaction with the outside world. During my 3 weeks with them, I observed their peculiar customs, particularly the constant motif of stag beetles, apparent from their clothes to their buildings and weapons. I first thought it was expert craftsmanship, but I now suspect the objects came from a different source. Myuu culture is very different from that of the surrounding tribes. They show a mix of hunter-gatherer and agricultural traits, and do not seem to have a clear social structure. Their art and religion are unlike anything I have seen. Stories are passed down from the elders to the young. Many of them are centered around the figure of Kinya, depicted in statues as a hybrid of a man and stag beetle. Communication was quite difficult due to the uniqueness of their language, which the translator was not able to fully grasp. I am not proud of having followed them in secret, but if it were not for that, I would not have seen the insect. At first, I thought they were hunting it, but then I realized their interaction looked more like a conversation. They followed a flock of birds to a clearing, where they stopped and chanted in unison. I got closer to take a photograph, but I was seen and had to leave expeditiously. Unfortunately, after this incident, I was not welcome in the village anymore, so I had to resume my journey. As you know, trying to publish this information only led to ridicule and me being cast out from academia. That is why I spent my life trying to prove their existence. Thank you again for your help, friend. I cannot do this alone at my age. Sincerely, Nigel Buckley. 1927, the Turner Bros Circus begins touring the USA with an unusual exhibit. Their publicity claims it is an Amazonian mammoth ant, though no such species has been described. For 2 years, they would tour the Midwest, attracting the curious and skeptics. Very little documentation remains apart from the posters and 2 photographs. The man who appears in the picture and poster is Henry Turner, one of the 2 founders of the circus. In later recollections from his brother Robert, he claimed Henry became obsessed with the ant. Towards the end, he was even sleeping in the cage with it. One day he just took off with the ant, left everything behind. Henry would not be heard from again. The loss of the founder and the stock market crash of 1929 was too much for the circus, which closed that year. Norway, 1953. Erling Jorgensen, a local journalist, visits the isolated parish of Ernis, accused by many of being a cult. His unpublished notes and photographs are the only remaining source on this group and the events that culminated in its destruction. The small parish was based around a modern church. Though initially unremarkable, starting around 1947 the community would take an isolationist turn. Parishioners started shunning external contact, except for the occasional missionary sent to recruit people into the group. In August 1953, journalist Erling Jorgensen was allowed to visit the community, take pictures, and interview their members. Though Erling was given relatively free rein, he was not allowed to enter the church during sermon hours, at which time he was put under watch. The community was headed by Thorhagen, often just described as the bishop, and his 3 sons. The self-proclaimed bishop and his entourage had essentially broken contact with the Church of Norway, forming their own hierarchy. The priests wore masks as part of their vestments. Many of the particular rituals of this group were centered around the youngest members. They wore white clothing and were referred to as initiates. The purpose of their initiation was never made clear. In an interview, a 7-year-old claims, "One day, I will be one with God." According to Erling's notes, on the day of his departure, he was taken over by curiosity. Instead of leaving, he snuck into the church and hid there, waiting for the sermon he had not been allowed to watch. As it started, he saw an immense creature appear from behind the altar. The church has been silent for hours, as that thing pulsates on the wall. I need to do something. Erling's unpublished notes end there. A fire destroyed the church that day. Erling never admitted to having been there. After his death, it was revealed that he had lit the match. Leaked report from the USSR Committee of State Security, KGB, 1961. Full report and translation below. In June 1961, a group of Navy personnel carried out a survey on sunken merchant ships in the Kara Sea, taken down during the Second World War by the Germans. The divers carried underwater cameras with them to document the state of the boats. Upon investigating the survey ship, Academic Shokalshish, sunken by a U-boat in 1943, the diver came upon the nest of some sort of creature resembling an insect of enormous size. Analysis has determined it to be an unknown species, and was given the provisional name of Vivishkova. The details are unclear, as only the camera was recovered, and the rest of the crew deemed the waters unsafe to investigate further. The pictures were taken back to KGB headquarters for analysis and deliberation. We have determined these documents to be of national security interest, and thus will be kept with utmost discretion. The rest of the diving crew has already been dealt with appropriately. Our next aim should be to recover the eggs shown in the pictures. A team will be discreetly assembled to deal with Vivishkova and bring back as many eggs as possible for the study. Scientists are also being gathered in attempts to train the animals as they are born. All of this will take place in our base in Dixon. The aim is to use them on enemy ships in response to American aggression, to neutralize them without leaving a trace of our actions. This could take a toll on their forces without linking back to us. Further developments will be communicated through private channels to the parties involved. Communicated for your information. Signed, Chairman of the Committee, A. Shellapin. 21st of August, 1982. A report on a local TV channel in Sicily. A Roman ruin has been found last Monday when building a hotel near Modica. Archaeologists are asking for more time to study the elaborate mosaic, but are under pressure from the owners, who want the building done before July. This beautifully preserved mosaic has puzzled historians. Among rich hunting scenes, what looks to be an enormous wasp appears to be eating an antelope. This piece stands out from the other realistic scenes, and does not seem to match any known Roman myths. The photo above was recovered by the daughter of the late head archaeologist, Piero Baglieri. No other sources on the mosaic can be publicly found, nor information about the hotel that was built on top. Among the documents Nigel Buckley sent in 1984, you find his notes and illustrations. What can we glean from the new sightings we have documented of these creatures? They clearly appear to be related to insects, only at a much larger scale. Are they a part of the same species? Or perhaps a broader genus or family? Provisionally, I have decided to treat them as a single genus, which I call megalomorpha. I cannot say if the myriad forms we see are due to extreme individual variability, or if several species exist. What makes me lean towards the single species variability hypothesis is the shell found in Maine. These molts are more common in insects going through partial metamorphosis, which suggests megalomorphae may be capable of radical changes in form later in life. Nigel had spent all of his life studying these insects since he reportedly found one in Tanganyika in 1923. He passed away in 1986, not being able to complete his life work of redeeming his image in the scientific community. Most of the evidence you've seen so far is his work. Pictures found in an abandoned, remotely operated vehicle, 2004. It was recovered from the seafloor, damaged, and with its umbilical cord cut off, 3 years after being lost during the survey of the sunken ship Myuu. The vehicle was found during a seafloor survey by the Polynesian Oil and Gas Company. They were attempting to build an oil pipeline in Hawaii. The company closed in 2014, but an ex-employee managed to hold on to these documents. The note reads as follows. As some of you know, during the seafloor survey done between Honolulu and Molokai for the Hawaii Pipeline project, an abandoned remotely operated vehicle was found on the ocean floor. We believe it was used to survey the Myuu, a Japanese fishing boat sunk after an accident with the submarine USS Greenville in 2001. The ROV was probably lost during the survey, as we found the umbilical cord severed and signs of damage. The body of the vehicle was lifted, and some data recovered from it. Among it, some pictures were found. These were, to our knowledge, not obtained by the Navy. The CEO wishes to inform you that this matter will be resolved internally, as to not cause a delay in the pipeline project that may make it go over budget. We urge all employees to handle this matter with discretion, and not share this information with external sources, as it may trigger an unnecessary environmental inquiry that could damage the company. Last of all, as we reach the last stretch of this project, we want to congratulate you for all your efforts. It is thanks to each one of our valued employees that we have managed to come this far, and we are confident that with your help, we will keep reaching new heights. Strange trail cam pictures were recovered from a now-defunct hunting forum, October 2006. These screenshots were saved at the time by a user, but no archived version remains. The original poster could not be tracked down. Any new information on this subject would be greatly appreciated.
So I'm a bit spooked. Set up a couple trail cams yesterday, and when I looked at them today, I saw these two pics. Can anyone help me identify what this is? This was in Overton County, Tennessee, by the way. You think I could have discovered something new?
Lol, I have trouble believing this. Don't you think a huge insect like that would have been seen before? Either it's a weird camera trick where the bug is actually close, or you're full of it, friend.
Wow, okay. No need to be rude, Moose. I don't think there's a camera trick here. You can see there's trees in front of it, so it's not just the bug that got close. There's lots of unexplained animals that science hasn't studied yet, so that's a very closed-minded way of seeing things. I have no idea how to use Photoshop either, if that's what you imply. I don't even think it's possible to fake something like this. Anyway, if there's anyone willing to actually help out, please just let me know. Well, I guess I'm not sleeping tonight. Justin, I'm no photography expert, but this sounds like something that would happen with old cameras. Sometimes they would shoot twice in the same film. That's why people would see ghosts sometimes. Maybe something like this happened here and 2 pictures got mixed up. One of the bugs up close and a normal one. Seems more likely than a giant bug flying out there. Occam razor and all that. I can understand it's an error, but the odds of that happening twice seems unlikely. The cameras worked well otherwise. Do you folks have any other theories? Or if it's a normal bug, can anyone identify? Bump?
2011. A cave with Neolithic paintings and artifacts is found near Totec, Spain. Among the buried remains is an adult cranium with unknown malformations. The cave art appears to have religious significance. The first scene represents people fighting and escaping what appears to be a large insect-like form with 6 limbs and large horns. Below, people are kneeling before a similar figure in a more solemn pose. They make offerings to it. The following part has been purposefully chiseled off, leaving few recognizable traces. The final scene shows more people kneeling and laying their weapons below what looks like their deities, which show elements of both humans and the previous 6-limbed creature. No other gods of such description are known in the area.
Holy bug fucking shit! Some sort of tree of life of massive mind-controlling insects that has gone mostly undetected for the majority of history, other than isolated incidents of their documentation. I wonder if this is at all related to the giant cocoon that I keep in my closet and constantly pray to. Probably not though. Let's break down what we know. These large insectoid creatures have been sparingly documented throughout history. Spanning from 1905 to the current day, depictions and evidence of these creatures have been leaked into the public light. Despite this, the megalomorpha has still not been acknowledged officially by the scientific community.
Scientific community.
These creatures are either discovered as a cocoon or documented later on as various different fully grown insectoid critters. There are either many species of megalomorpha that always go through metamorphosis, or they have incredible variability in what the other side of that metamorphosis might end up looking like. Not only do the megalomorpha go through an intense metamorphosis process, changing their bodies to a myriad of forms, but it appears that the final stage of the megalomorpha lifestyle involves fusing with a human for some reason. And this can be seen in the man-bug monster, the myth, the legend, Tio Alfredo, which translates incorrectly to English as Uncle Creamy Pasta. Tio Alfredo was a megalomorpha that worked his way up the corporate ladder by fusing with what I assume was once the real Tio Alfredo. Evidently, Uncle Bug had been with the family since the time of the narrator's great-grandfather, and had convinced them that it was a part of the family.
I think Tio Alfredo is deserving enough of love that he shouldn't have to convince them of anything. All he wanted was your love and bodily fluid. Isn't that what we all want?
Even though this looks like a clusterfuck of random bug family information, combined with some research from another video, this may illustrate what exactly the hell these creatures are. One way we can potentially further understand what the megalomorpha are is by not stealing the information directly from someone else's video. Speaking of, Valdés-Hevia actually answered a bit of the question of what the hell these bugs are in a Curious Archive video. So I'm gonna not steal that.
The megalomorpha, they can kind of make themselves appear to the people around them as kind of whatever they interpret. And it's based on their previous beliefs. What their background is, they might think it's some sort of deity.
It appears that the megalomorpha manipulates the human mind and manufactures a reality in which the humans love and care for the insects.
It becomes their baby, their god, their Tio, whatever they need to be to gain the adoration of the hairless apes in question. From there, it somehow convinces one person to fuse with them, allowing them to change into their final form. Why it needs humans to complete its life cycle is still a mystery, and I'm not sure if these bugs count as a parasite, or if the combo in question is a new animal in its own right. Whatever the case, we can see from the documentation leaks that these creatures have been with us since the days of the Romans, the Vikings, the cavemen, and continue to be with us in the days of online hunting forums, I guess. I want to see megalomorpha porn. No, I don't. Since before humanity could write things down, these creatures have been here, infiltrating select pockets of the human species and controlling their minds for unknown, possibly nefarious purposes. Before we had our technology, our language, our society, we served only these insects. Who knows, maybe they control our numbers in a much greater ratio than we think. Maybe we're just a giant, busy ant colony. And under the surface, everything we do is in service of our one massive, pulsating queen. Oh god,
I'm gonna come. One theory I have is that the megalomorpha themselves are the reason they haven't been discovered yet. Think about it. If you were a giant mind-controlling insect, would you want the little weird hairless apes that you're controlling to know enough about your existence to be capable of forming an opinion about what you're doing? Because I wouldn't. I would mind control the apes into thinking it's not a problem because I'm not real. One giant question I have about these mind-manipulating buggies is, what the hell do they want? Chances are that the megalomorpha just wants what we all want, a bigger dick.
To live.
It's likely that this is just the evolutionary strategy that these creatures have always known. They stayed close to humans and brainwashed the apes to care for them because it worked as a survival strategy, just like cats. By controlling the little wrinkles in their head meatballs, the insects could ensure not only that they'd survive, but in fact live comfortably off the hard work of humanity. It's also possible that these creatures aren't just big brainwashing bugs and do have some sort of ulterior motive. But in true unknowable horror fashion, what exactly that motive would be is impossible to gauge. Moving on from what is literally happening in these documentations, because no matter how hard I try, I'm going to be too stupid to figure this out in the entirety, the story of Megalomorpha is quite thematically rich as well. One clear theme of this story is metamorphosis. Not only is it the literal life cycle of the massive bug critters in question, but the theme of change is present throughout the timeline, especially in the longer and later entries. Individuals, families, even large communities can be transformed under their influence. One can see this clearly in the fisherman's obsession, the prehistoric people going from hunting the insects to worshipping and finally becoming one with them, and even in Adrian de la Cruz's escape from the cycle. In the end, both humanity and Megalomorpha come together and change into something new, something grander than both of them separately. One may wonder about the inspiration behind this story. Hevia states that he was inspired by Lovecraft's storytelling methods, in which he told his stories through found documents that only had little traces of evidence throughout the years. It was also inspired by real-life historical accounts of expeditions. The combination of these two makes sense to me, because the only person who's going to be more vague than Lovecraft is the guy who's literally paid to write all that shit down. Do you have any theories about the Megalomorpha? If you should comment below and I'll tell you why you're wrong. I'm smarter than you.
What would you say was your inspiration behind the Megalomorpha series?
I was just like looking to do something horror, old school. And the idea I had is like, I want this to be like archaeologists digging something up. And I had found an image. I was like, okay, this image, this guy is standing next to a tomb, it's like dug up under the earth. I like that. But what should I put in there? I had no idea. And I was scrolling Twitter one day and I saw someone say, like, just someone post a picture of a huge cocoon on their hands, a really big one, and saying like really freaked out, like, what the fuck is this? It looks like an alien baby. And people in the comments explain, oh, that's the cocoon for I don't recall the species of moth, one of the biggest species of moth. That's why the cocoon was so large. I was like, that's really cool. Like that looks so alien just on its own. That needs to be what I do with it. And then I edited some stuff on it later on when I did more cocoons. I didn't really edit them that much because back then I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know it was going to be a series or anything. So back then it was just like, oh, I'm just going to edit some like more creepy stuff on this cocoon so it looks kind of like weird or biomechanical and stuff. I just did that without thinking about it twice, and that eventually became Megalomorpha.
If you were to describe maybe the theme and underlying message of the Megalomorpha series, what would you describe it as?
A lot of the overarching theme is like metamorphosis, and it's not only like the literal metamorphosis of the bugs that literally metamorphose with humans, but it's also like about the changes they cause around them to people, and it's like how a normal farming community can become a cult. For example, you can like the Tio Alfredo one is a metaphor for abuse in a family and how it can perpetrate through generations, and often like the people in it they can't see what's going on until they get out. So it's a story about like someone going back to their family that they escaped long ago, and going back to take revenge on an abusive family member, basically. Transformation in that sense, in that case, like the person like went away and was able to change like their perspective and then realize that, oh, what I went through was fucked up. Or the old fisherman who we can clearly see is like really lonely and suddenly finds this cocoon, and the cocoon makes him believe that its child, and he starts taking care of it like a child, and eventually like gives his own life away to it, taking real life things, real life situations, and using the megalomorpha as like metaphors for these changes, you know?
I know you mentioned earlier that you got your start more in medicine. The character of Nigel Buckley, how he got kind of ostracized. Did your experience in the scientific community at all shape how you portray the scientific community later on in your work?
Not really. I think Nigel Buckley is kind of an asshole. I like making asshole main characters. You know, sometimes they get what's coming to them. In case of Nigel Buckley, he just gets ignored. But Nigel in this case was just like, hey, I'm this young guy who's in a colonial place, just going to places where I'm not invited and ignoring people's warnings. I come across like something that's horrifying to me and that kind of like takes a whole turn on his life and kind of ruins his life. In this case, like the whole like scientific community ignoring him is like, it's this punishment for like, he gets his own life ruined by his hubris and by not respecting the people he was like meant to be studying, quote unquote. Yeah. So in this case, like the scientific community isn't really like, it's more of like a metaphor for the punishment this guy gets. And he's also like a really like useful character because he's like one of the few people that he's keenly aware of the megalomorpha. He's actually seen one, not for long enough to be like brainwashed by them, but is clearly like, you know, changed the course of his life. So he's the person who has gathered a lot of this evidence, so that it's not like all disjointed.
Is there an idea about how the megalomorpha would directly influence the human mind biologically in that speculative biology kind of vein?
Yeah, that's something I've kind of left in the air, because you could interpret the megalomorpha as like more biological things or like supernatural things. I want to keep both of the interpretations like plausible and equally readable, right? Because I think both are good, and I don't want to take like a side there. If it were biological, it could just be like pheromones. Like in this case, the moth I used in that story is Creatonus gangis. I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's a moth that has like an inflatable organ. I call it the inflatable moth ass, that it uses to release pheromones. So it's like, oh, that's really cool. Like it just stands there in the back of the church, inflates a huge organ, and just stays there pulsating. Everyone's just watching in silence, and they're literally they're being brainwashed. They think they're seeing like an angel, and this guy comes in, it's just snuck in, and it's obviously like still not like going through the brainwashing that this whole community has, is left speechless and never speaks about it again until his deathbed. So he is kind of brainwashed in a way. Like he is like mentally really affected by the megalomorpha, and it's also like, you know, as with a lot of the characters that come across them, it just changes the course of their life completely.
If given the opportunity, would you fuse with a bug?
Good question. I mean, they can live for who knows how long, an indeterminate amount of time once they fuse with a human. So if I'm really old and yeah, like maybe yeah, let's go with it. I want to be immortal. Even though I'd probably lose all my humanity in the way, but it would be a fitting end for me.
If you were asked to describe your work for someone who's never heard of it, what would you say?
So I would say it's like posts that maybe your grandma sent you on Facebook that are complete misinformation, but your grandma like just believed it outright. Like turning that into a more serious art form and a storytelling like medium, using Photoshop and like stuff that looks real, at least at first glance, to kind of like immerse you in a story in a different way than other mediums can let you do.
Are there themes that you find yourself consistently returning to in your art? And if so, why is that?
On the one hand, it's like folklore, because I just love folklore. And for example, like I'm from Asturias, which is a small region in the north of Spain. And it has really beautiful and interesting folklore with like Celtic roots. Whenever I look for art to represent, like I want to tell somebody who's not familiar about the Gualebre, like a really cool dragon creature that exists there, I go look for art, and it sucks. It's really bad. There's not a lot of it, and it's not very good. I'm like, I want to change that. So that's the theme I always come back to, folklore, because I just love folklore in general, and I want to represent my own folklore that I grew up with. There's also a theme that I go back to a lot, is parasites, because I studied medicine, and like it's like just studying medicine and seeing all the messed up stuff that can happen to the body is it kind of like it makes you immune to a lot of the like icky stuff that a lot of people don't like. Parasites are something that I couldn't like even through like understanding them and learning more about them, it still feels like I don't know, super like icky and horrible to me, like at a deeper level, I think. So I love parasites, and I keep doing stuff that, you know, it's either like a more literal parasites, like, I don't know, the womb worm that you discovered, or it can be a more like, I guess, metaphorical parasite, like something that maybe takes over your mind, like the megalomorpha, right? Where they're not like as physically dangerous, though they can be, they're huge bugs, but they are, you know, the scary thing about them is that they kind of convince you of anything they want to, and that's kind of like, you know, they're taking over your mind in the same way that a parasite takes over your body.
You mentioned earlier you studied medicine. Do you find that your experience in science has influenced your artistic expressions?
It's given me a lot of like language to do medical horror. Like, it's very rare for an actual like a horror artist or horror like storyteller to be well versed in medicine, because usually people who study medicine will stay in that lane for the rest of their lives. So there's not a lot of people who can do this. It's like, this is a very specific niche to me, and it gives me like enough language to sound convincing while telling like complete bullshit. To the point where there's actual doctors who have kind of fallen for, like at least like partially fallen for stuff I've done. I don't know if you've covered the one with the teeth coming out of the bones, where it's like an X-ray of a hand. Mm-hmm. So it's just a hand X-ray, and there's teeth coming out of the bones. And I posted that on Twitter, and I was just looking through the replies. And I see someone with a profile pic with like a white coat, tagging another person, like doctor something something, tagging doctor something something. It's like, oh, this had us fooled. It was just like a conversation between them. But what I gathered from it is like they shared this on a group chat with like other rheumatologists, like literally the doctors who, if this disease were real, they would be studying it. They shared it on a group chat, and they were like freaking out, and they went to search it, and they found out, oh, this is not real, and they were all laughing about it. It's like, oh no, I fooled doctors. I was too convincing.
I would be proud of that. That's cool.
It was funny. At least they realized. So.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
Going on that tangent, since you make things that could, in some perspectives with people with very little context, be considered hoaxes, other than that story, is there anything where you posted something artistically and you looked back at it later and you went, oh no, this is this is not what I intended?
Yeah, so I always try to do stuff, even if I do like, especially with medical stuff, I think that's the one that's most, like, if a bad actor were to take it, they could misinterpret it in like the worst ways, because there's a lot of medical misinformation and it leads to like real world harm. So I always try to keep it like fantastical enough that, you know, people maybe while they're reading it, they freak out a little bit, but they quickly realize, oh, of course this is bullshit, right? Like this bug that eats your brain from the inside. It's impossible that it could learn to replicate the activity of your brain and like learn to be you, essentially. And then like their bugs cannot grow that large, like physically. So if you apply a little bit of logic, you quickly realize, okay, that's bullshit. So that if somebody were to misinterpret it, you know, they wouldn't fool a lot of people. But yeah, I always also try to think like, okay, if someone like a anti-vaxxer were to take some of my art and use it as like, you know, this is what the vaccine will do to you. I always try to think about that and think like, okay, if they were to take this, like, could they use it to further misinformation or something? And I try to stay away from that sort of thing. Yeah, I always try to think about that because it can be dangerous if misused.
You can see some of it in your work, but who would you say are your biggest artistic and literary inspirations?
There's, on the one hand, like stylistically, I would say there's a little bit of Lovecraft, some of Lovecraft's stories, and like taking aside like what a horrible person he was in real life, just like his storytelling method, which were really kind of pioneered a sort of like in cinema we would call the found footage genre, right? It's like these found documents, could be called. I really like that style where it's instead of telling a story directly through like a narrator, you could say also Dracula is a good example of this. It's told through documents that happen in the real world. So it's like, it's letters and reports and stuff. So you're getting like little pieces of evidence that were passed down from when this story happened. I really like that storytelling method, and also trying to combine a lot of storytelling methods from early creepypasta, which is a weird thing to call an inspiration because it was mostly very badly written. Not to disparage the people who wrote them, like they were mostly kids, I assume. but they kind of took advantage of the internet as a place to put stories, and as like a new way of publishing things, which is really interesting. And they really used the sort of found footage genre. They mix it in with like internet stuff. I really like that. I really like that mix. A really good example of this creepypasta storytelling method, I think, is the early Slenderman stories. Like when people were coming up with Slenderman in the Something Awful forums, and it was just kind of like this collective storytelling, and people were trying to come up with, oh, here's an old document of like a German manuscript from the Middle Ages, and it shows a really similar creature to the Slenderman, and they would edit an old drawing. I really like that storytelling style. Yeah, then Junji Ito, for example, I think it's a very obvious inspiration for the Fractal series and for a lot of stuff. I love how Junji Ito takes like just interesting concepts, like fun concepts, and sometimes kind of absurd things, and turns them into really cool horror. What if there was every person had a balloon that looked like their face, whose only objective was to kill them, and suddenly like every person's balloon appears, and it's like an apocalypse scenario where everyone's being chased by their own balloon. It's like, how did you come up with that? What a strange story. I love it. And then like more modern stuff, like the current, I guess, wave or community of horror artists on the internet, I think it always inspires me. I've collaborated with a lot of them. You could say like Trevor Henderson, David Romero, who I've done the Lycanthrope series with. Luke Baker, I did the facade with. We're actually planning more stuff on that, but I won't spoil.
This is kind of a basic piece that you have probably been asked a lot before in every interview. But if you had to pick a favorite, what piece would that be and why?
I would say Megalomorpha is like, it's kind of like my child in that way. It's the very first horror piece that I ever did was the first part of Megalomorpha, the one with the archaeologists finding the buried cocoon. That's like the very first horror thing I did, and Megalomorpha grew from that. It was meant to be like a one-off thing. And I said, what if I did more? And that's how the series was born, and that's how I started doing horror. And you can see, if you just read it in like chronological order of how the chronological order of when I wrote them, you can see me like get better at storytelling and try to tell longer and more complex things, especially the last few ones I'm really proud of. It's gotten to the point where I actually have quite a few Megalomorpha things like half done, but I expect so much from myself that it's like the expectations of, oh, this has to be like, it's Megalomorpha, so it has to be my best stuff. I get stuck with it because I can't finish the images. I'm never happy with them, you know.
What drew you to horror art specifically?
It was around 2020. It was during the confinement, like when we were all stuck at home. Back then I was doing like surreal art. I was doing very different stuff, still Photoshop, but I was doing a very different style. And I had been doing that for a few years. I was kind of burned down on it. More than anything, I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to not just have the image like on its own, but I wanted to say a little more and try some more storytelling stuff. So I came up with, I should try and do like something horror related, and I would like to do it like old school, with like old black and white photos that I got from like a public domain archive. Yeah, there was just like an experiment at first. Like I just want to do something a little bit different and see if I like it, and you know, then the rest is history. I guess I did like it.
What drew you to art in the first place?
As silly as that might sound, one of the main drivers of me doing art was playing Spore, the video game Spore. I used to love that as a kid. There was this little like Spanish speaking community that I made a few friends through there, that some of them I still keep to this day. Since Spore didn't really have like direct messages that you could send to other users, we would just like make a bunch of creatures and stuff, and people would just talk in the comments. It was chaotic and very silly. A lot of them started DeviantArt accounts. I was like, I joined DeviantArt. Back then, so my mom used to work as like a graphic designer freelance, and she had a Mac computer with all the Adobe programs pirated. At some point she changed her computer. She gave me her old one that had like everything on it. It had Photoshop and many other programs in it. And I just started messing around with Photoshop. And I said, oh, this is kind of like Spore in a way. Like, I don't know if you've played Spore, but...
Oh yeah, all the time when I was a kid. I actually recently got a PC because I needed to get a new computer, and I got a PC because it can play Spore.
Yes, hell yeah. I recently replayed it with... I played it on stream with like a few mods and stuff just to add more parts and remove the complexity limits. It was really fun. I started using Photoshop, and it was kind of like Spore. Like, you have parts, you can take chunks of pictures, move them around, and so I just really enjoyed that. And that was, I guess, kind of like the first time I did art more seriously.
What would you say are you looking forward to for the future of your work?
Oh, there's so many things. I just want to like always try new stuff. First off, I want to close off my current series because I don't want to have the sword above me of like, oh, your two big unfinished series are still pending. But yeah, I want to finish Fractal. I want to like at least finish the parts of Megalomorpha that I have in mind, because I think I could just do Megalomorpha forever if I wanted to. It's all individual stories, so you could just keep going. But at least I want to do the ones I had in mind currently. But apart from that, I'd like to also try new stuff. I'd like to try maybe more written stuff without image or with barely any images. Maybe try to write a book or a short novel or something. I would like to learn some video compositing, which I don't know a lot about, and it's a different skill. Maybe try out some like found footage video stuff as well. I don't know, there's so many things I want to try in so little time.
If you somehow missed the metric fuck ton of references to it, this video was based on collections in the VALDEVIA. It'll be linked in the description. Eduardo Valdés-Hevia is a really amazing artist and a friend to the channel, and he's really been helpful in the production of these videos, and honestly, he's been a joy to work with. Please go check out his stuff. I want to cover him more in the future, and yeah, go do it or else. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with all notifications enabled, or I'll kill you. Shout out the inner circle. Love y'all.
Okay, bye.